Hello everybody and welcome to my sewing room. My name's Diane. Apologies straight up for the multiple layers and the croaky voice, but like many of us, I'm carrying a cold at the moment, but it hasn't stopped me sewing. So I will share with you the Beagle Quilt, known to our friends as Bradley. So it's for all beagle lovers out there everywhere. The only downside, I think, with owning a beagle is that they have a short lifespan, but the memories that we carry with us last us a lifetime. So this one is, like I say, for all beagle lovers everywhere. So I started this quilt because a couple of weeks ago I made a cat quilt, and I have owned a cat before. We had a cat when the boys were young, called it Tintin. Just the opposite really, longevity with the cat. She was nearly 20 when she left this planet. She was quite old, so I made the cat quilt and I managed to get through lots and lots of my 3-inch squares for the background. So it was a stash buster for Project Linus, and I thought I could do the same for myself, make a quilt for my shop, and I use up lots of my precious 3-inch squares and stash that I have, smaller pieces of fabric. I cut into some longer yardage for the black because I didn't have any scraps of that, but everything else was in my pre-cuts or my saved smaller pieces. So I started off looking at the fabric that I had, trying to decide what fabric to put together for the background, and I happened to have quite a few pieces of smaller cuts of William Morris, excuse me, Larkspur and the Strawberry Thief. So there was enough of that, I thought, that I could put together to make a nice size background for the quilt. And this is what I've chosen. It's a William Morris print. So we have the Strawberry Thief over here in a teal, a golden yellow and a aubergine background. And then just to add a little bit more brightness, I have some solid in this mustard, old gold, and there's some bright yellow. So I thought I would make lots of little 4 patches for the background like I did with a cat quilt, and then I just needed to put together a beagle design. So a beagle, if you're not familiar with the breed, they're a medium-sized dog, I would say, quite lean, muscular, my dog was, and so I decided though on the design that I would put the dog lying with his feet down, so they're always an alert dog. I called my beagle Fibonacci. We called him Archie for short because he was so inquisitive. He was into everything, so it was always like he was saying, what's this, what's that, what's that? So always an alert dog. He used to sit with his head up, his feet forward and his tail over. He had quite a big bend to his tail, and so I'll share the design with you. Well, it's New Year's Day today and everybody around me are dropping with colds and flu symptoms. I can feel a little bit of a tickle, so I'm locking myself away in my sewing room, and I've just designed this lovely little beagle quilt. So as you can hear from that insert, I had a cold on New Year's Day. I forgot about that. It's probably the same one. You keep thinking that it's gone. It comes and goes again, but I'm hoping it's on its way out now. I can't possibly wear any more layers. I'm trying to sweat it out. I've just had a steam bath and I'm trying to get rid of it. So anyway, that was the design, and then I looked for the colours to create the dog's body. And this is my colour palette, so I thought I'd give him a little spotty nose. He's going to be brown for the main body and black for his saddleback and for his ear and tail. I will need to add some white for his little flag on the end of his tail and his paws and his chest. And so once the fabric was selected, I just started making blocks towards the 4 patch. So I did some strip piecing. I did cut some strips width of fabric 3 inches wide and sewed those together in pairs. I was making pairs to start with, because I wanted, like I say, to have a good selection in the background. And what I'm trying to do is create a variation of 4 patches. And so here there are lots of 2 patches put together. And then I'm taking sets of 10 to my sewing machine and putting those together. And then as I join them, I try to keep them separate so I can see the variation. I don't want to have too many of the same block. So I did work out how many 4 patches I'd need, and I'll put that, the design for the quilt, on my community page. So once I'd made all those, I looked back then at the design of the dog, and I could work out how many half square triangles I needed in the dog fabric and in the background with the browns or the whites, just to make his shape. And then I lay out the shape of his face. So like similar to the cat quilt, it's all multiples of 3 inches. So if I'm not using 2 3-inch squares sewn together, I'll use a strip of 3 by 5.5 or 5.5 inch squares. All the sizes are on the design. So the first thing I did was to lay out his face. And then just to have a good look at the proportions, I put the shape of the back of his head. So his neck, his shoulder, down to his shoulders on the board too. And the only time I didn't use 3-inch half square triangles was for his nose. I didn't want to have quite a sharp angle at the top of his nose or the bottom of his jaw, so I just snowballed a piece of fabric off, and I just used little bits of off-cut scraps to fill those spaces for his nose and his bottom of his chin. And I checked that on the design board just to make sure that everything looked okay in proportion. I thought that looked okay, so then I moved on to his ears. And I did the same again with the ears, just snowballed the corners, just wanting to make it less of a sharper angle, just to round them off. And I filled in the missing gaps with the brown fabric, his body fabric. And once I was happy with the way his ears looked, I then worked down across the saddle of his back. So our Beagle had a black sort of saddle shape on his back, and I did the same snowballing technique on the first panel of his back. I didn't want such a sharp angle as the back end of the saddle, and so I just did the same as I did with the ears. And then it was just a case of filling out the rest of his body. Like I say, all the sizes are on the community page, and you can just see me now how I put the rest of the body together. And the only sort of guidelines I gave myself for peace in the background was I didn't want any of the aubergine squares to touch directly to the dog's body, because I thought that might sort of interfere with the clean lines of his shape. So I wanted to have the paler ones touching his body, and I didn't want to put 2 squares next to each other. I quite like them diagonally, and there's a lot of that, but there was no 2 squares touching, and that was my only rules. And so I sewed all the dog together first, his body and the little bits of background that are touching together in columns where I could, and then when I worked my way up to do the background, I sort of worked in chunks. There's no correct way, it's just whatever way you feel more comfortable with. I was just checking really to make sure that the 4 patches were well distributed. I didn't want the same blocks all clumped together. And so I used up all of my William Morris prints in the background. There are some strips left, and I've put those into a package I'm saving because one day I'd like to make a William Morris log cabin. So I am saving strips of that, or little bits of treasures of William Morris as I collect them. So that's all gone now, so really pleased with that. I managed to use up all of the brown for his body. That was in a sort of crosshatch type textured fabric cotton. So all of that's gone. So working well through the stash. I can't finish it. He's not finished yet. I bought quite a bit of fabric in the December sales, and like a lot of people, we're still waiting for those deliveries to come. You're just getting messages saying, you know, that they've had a lot of orders and they're working their way through them. So as far as I'm aware, I'm still getting the orders that I placed on the 27th of December. I'm not going out to buy any more to finish it because it's no by January, and I do want to work through my stash where I can. I have got the batting, so I'm just waiting, like I say, for the backing. I did also have a request from somebody who asked if I could create a Corgi design. I'm not in a hurry really to create a Corgi quilt particularly, although it does look nice now that I have designed one. So I'll show you the Corgi design. I'll put an image of that up now, and that will go on my community page. So if you want that, anybody wants to make a Corgi, that'll be on there with the Beagle. Again, 3-inch squares or multiples of 3-inch. And so that's it for this week. Hopefully next week I will have a bit more of a voice. Say, I don't look great, I don't sound great, but I'm feeling not too bad at the moment. But it's just the season, isn't it? So we will move on and we won't let anything get in the way of our quilting. Next week, well, I'll hope to show you the fabric haul if that arrives. I managed to bag, I hope, some really good bargains, and I'll share those with you if they come, and perhaps have this quilt finished. But I have got a quick video of, it's a coverlet, it's not a quilt, it was another request from a member of my family. I can't show it you yet because it's his birthday tomorrow, quite a big birthday. My son is 40 tomorrow, and so he requested a quilt for his birthday, and he's quite a chunky man's man. He works from home. He wants the quilt to go in his office where he and the dog spend most of his days working on his computer. You won't believe the fabric he chose. Anyway, I'll show you that next week. It's quite funny. So that's it for me this week. I hope you are all right, and if you've got these colds, just don't let them get you down. Keep calm and keep on sewing, and I'll see you soon. Take care. Bye.